everyone. Welcome to today's Idea Cafe on Centering Indigenous Voices, sponsored by the Idea Center for Public Gardens. You may have heard that we are transitioning to an Idea community through the association, which is really exciting. And be on the lookout for next month's event, which will be an Idea Lounge discussion about some of the topics covered in this Indigenous Voices webinar series, as well as just kind of an introduction to the Idea community and how you can get involved. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maylin.
Thank you so much, Brianna. It's very exciting to be here for everybody. My name is Maylin Plummer. I'm director of the IDEA Center for Public Gardens. My pronouns are she, her. I'm wearing red glasses today and a black and white sweater and wearing my long brown hair down today. It is so good to have you all here. And I'm very excited to help sponsor and facilitate today's Idea Cafe centering Indigenous voices. Thank you, Brianna, the Idea Cafe committee, and panelists for all your help to make this happen. If you've joined us before, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome, and we are so glad you are here. Our goal is to build a community of courageous conversations and create transformation one conversation at a time. We hope today's topic will be insightful and a launching point for further discussion within your organization. Today's conversation is a continuation from our previous Idea Cafe in January, Indigenous Partnerships with Gardens and Parks, where we hosted presentations from various gardens, arboreta, and parks from the US and Canada. And they're sharing their efforts with Indigenous and First Nations peoples and organizations. This session, we will be sharing perspectives and views from Indigenous and First Nations citizens when it comes to allyship and also understanding some of the challenges they may be experiencing. So with that, I welcome our panelists and we'll briefly introduce them. We have Carmen Gray, Operations Specialist in the Horticulture Department of Assiniboine Park Conservancy. In the last presentation, it was around the leaf and the Indigenous Peoples Garden. We have Marissa Lauren Carmi from the UNC American Indian Center, who is a partner of the North Carolina Botanic Garden. Vickie Jeffries, who is an Occaneechi Saponi Tribal Administrator, who has also partnered with Duke Gardens and North Carolina Botanic Garden. And we have Rebecca Webster, an Oneida scholar, Director of Graduate Studies at the American Indian Studies Department at University of Minnesota Duluth. Additionally, she is a steward of Ukwakhwa Farm on the Oneida Reservation in Wisconsin on her family's 10-acre farm. Welcome, everyone. So to get started, I'm just going to open with kind of a broad question. What happens when we center Indigenous voices and include Indigenous perspectives? Who would like to start? Feel free to jump in or raise your hand.
I'll go ahead and start. I think it's when we are included, we have to be at the table. So many times we're not at the table and decisions are made based on what someone other, like a non-native, is thinking about what's good for us. And it's not necessarily good for us, but oftentimes like you don't see us there and all these decisions are being made. And they're not the right decisions because we know what's best for us. And I don't think anyone can tell us what's best for our tribal nations or anything. And, sometimes when I am in like a meeting or something like that, and you have like, I'm just going to say non-native talking about, oh, let's do this. This should be good. This should be good for this tribal community. And then, even though you voice your opinions and things like that, they go unheard. It's like, oh, yeah, they listen, but then that's it. And you don't hear anything else after that. And then when you are invited to certain meetings to brainstorm different things, and you sit there through these meetings and follow-up never happens. So our voices aren't really being heard. They're just kind of like having us there to say, I always feel like it's a checkbox. You ever get emails and people say, can I meet with you? I've been meeting with all these tribes. And I always feel like it's a checkbox. Yeah, I met with this tribe. I met with this tribe. Yes, I did this. Yes, I did that. Like it's completing what they're supposed to do, but no action is ever going to come from it. And I think it's so important for us to be there, to be at the table during these conversations.
And like you said, to be heard, actually listened to, right? Yeah.
I could add to that. I think it's that we bring a completely different perspective to the table that oftentimes gets overlooked. So, for example, I was participating at a conference on a panel about the history of agriculture in the United States, and a non-Indigenous man spoke before me, and he started off his presentation with European contact. And it was like, well, hold on, wait a minute. Our perspective talks about the history of agriculture here, and it starts with our creation story. So those are two vastly different worldviews that, if our voices aren't heard, you're not going to capture that. Or if they are heard, you're going to hear them from somebody else's lens instead of our own. And I think we have more than enough people that are capable of sharing our story that we should be able and allowed to do that, and provided the space to do so.
Mm-hmm. I guess I can add on to both of those points too. By centering Indigenous voices, there are a lot of positives that can come from it. So I think there's the preservation of traditional knowledge throughout the work that you do, whether it's in a public garden, a botanical garden, conservatory, and then you're also perpetuating sustainable practices as well. So there's that come from traditional knowledge. A lot of the approaches to horticulture or tending to the land are quite sustainable, and there's lots of reciprocal practices that happen throughout that. And I think that including our voices is super beneficial in that sense, where it's just there are these really wonderful approaches that you can take to horticulture or governing a green space, and there's lessons to be learned from, to what you were saying, Becky, what happened before settlers came to Canada or to North America.
And I suppose I'll close this out. I think speaking from the perspective of an employee of the American Indian Center, and specifically our work with our American Indian Cultural Gardens. So the American Indian Cultural Garden is a community-driven initiative. It came out of community ideas, community desires, and it is something we continue to consult community members along the way. And this is just an essential component of the garden. And people have been, partners or other institutions and entities on campus have really admired that, where they say, oh, that's like that you engage the Native community in this whole project. And now that's so interesting. We think, well, this is just a Native philosophy, is to be in relationship with people, to not think that we are, even as Native people, that we know all the answers and that we know what all the Native community members here in North Carolina want, or our Native community members on campus want. This is just, that is our philosophy and an understanding of ourselves and the world. And I think about how, if other people are inspired by that thinking, a place like a university, which is a kind of one of these of many institutions that are, people can be on the outside looking in and feel like it's not a place for them or a place where they have a say. You can overcome that by adopting this type of thinking that we do, of constant consultation, constant engagement, listening, exchanging ideas, and making sure that what we're doing is community driven. So
thank you all for sharing that, because I think that, why we're talking about this as well is because I think that there are good intentions there, but I also think that there's a lot of discomfort, a lot of fear laced with this desire to help, right? So how can non-Indigenous allies be a part of positive change? Kind of thinking within that kind of context, right? But what is it that allies can do? And what does that allyship maybe look like? I'm going to throw that in there. Who would like to start us off?
Oh, go ahead, Vickie.
Oh, no, go right ahead.
I would say I love the example from our partner in North Carolina Botanical Gardens, which is a university institution that falls under the UNC Chapel Hill umbrella. And we have an initiative here at the center called Healthy Native North Carolinians, where we supply funds, resources directly to tribal communities to implement projects of their own design. They define the projects themselves. We support them, provide technical assistance and resources. Early on, a conversation with NCBG was just around hosting a space. Can we use space with NCBG to host some of these programs that we have with Healthy Native North Carolinians? And that was just part of these early conversations. And NCBG said, of course, we will do this. This is just, we would love to host, and this would make our space your own. And that philosophy has that approach to just giving us space to have programming and accommodations, and it's a beautiful space, has grown into this flourished into this really beautiful partnership. But it really just started with NCBG saying, we have this space, please use it and make it your own. And it's such a low stakes way, I think, of just showing your support and hands off, and not also becoming about the ally themselves. It's we have this resource and please use it. And I think that's been something that's and all the beautiful work that's come out of it since that just simple gesture of, please, we offer our space for you to use how you see fit and as you want to. And that so many great things have come out of it.
I love that. And I also love the kind of the underscore there, which is, and they didn't say, and by the way, here's what we need in exchange. Or, you know what I mean? Here's the use of the space, by the way, so I really I love that. Would anybody else like to add anything?
Well, I would like to say that for UNC and, with the healthy eating grant, we've been a part of it for so long. I can't even remember how long. But, that's whatever's going on there, anything to do, we're always invited. We're always at the table for that. Even for the cultural garden, our input they want. So it's that nice being able to do that. Then anytime you send an email to Danielle or anyone, everybody answers, or you have questions, but they keep us in the loop all the time and let us know if these things are going on. They want our input. So it's really great. And you have this great relationship. And you said with the healthy eating grant, they let us decide what we need, not saying, okay, you're going to plant some tomatoes over there and you're going to be happy, but they let us know what we need. And so that's really, keeping us in that loop, and it feels good. And, some other things is that, some of our, people always ask for say land acknowledgements and all this other stuff. And but for them, they should use them as allies when they're doing any type of meeting, and you're always on native land. So, but you should do these whether virtual or in person or anything like that. So we were able to collaborate with Elon University, where they have this posted in their university, and then when they start something, they always start with a land acknowledgement. And just supporting the indigenous communities in your area, and not only when you need an Indian speaker at your event, and we get emails like that, and that's all they want. They don't know anything else about us or anything. They even get our name. Well, we have a long name, but they get the name spelled wrong and stuff like that. And just, decolonizing these institutions, because a lot, they just kind of, instead of being allies, they just call us when they need us, and there's so many different ways that you can be an ally for us, and don't use our information, our cultural and our traditional practices, and even our artifacts, without consulting us, and then you're having presentations and you see a non-native up there talking about maybe one of our traditional practices. Well, what do you know about it? You're not even native. So, just kind of keeping us and being an ally for us, ask us for, come to us for the information so that it can be accurate and not something that you've read out of a book or anything like that. And just, and even with the language, we remove some of that, the language, the stereotype from your lexicon. But, consult with us, be an ally for that. Even as how we want to be addressed, what is our nation and stuff, and just don't, pick stuff up. So it also goes with that respect and everything, and support the work that we do. Support us in our communities, because you are on our land, wherever you're living, you are occupying, native land. Don't let me get back into land back. I'll stop there. Okay. So.
I think webinars like this are really important too, because the whole voice is to center indigenous voices, and in part of allyship, it's amplifying indigenous voices. So, if you are somebody who supports indigenous initiatives, then that's really wonderful, and it gives the space for positive growth. But I think to be a good ally, you really have to understand what it is that you are supporting. So educating yourself is crucial. And that can't always, it's a bit of a catch-22. You can't always rely on Indigenous people to be available at your disposal to give you that information. I think it does take some personal work to find the proper resources, accurate resources, books written by Indigenous authors, art made by Indigenous people, supporting their business, their work from start to finish, and including us in the process of, if it is through consultation, as you were mentioning, Vickie, not just when you're needed for that one part. It should be at the conception and to completion of whatever that project might be.
Yeah, and I just want to echo my two favorite things when people ask about how to be a good Indigenous ally. The first one is to be mindful of people's time and energy, because so often people come to us and just extract information and extract time from us and give nothing in return. So just be mindful of what you're asking for. And then the next one is know when to step back. So sometimes we're in a space and there's Indigenous and non-Indigenous people there, to understand how much space you're taking up and holding, when maybe there should be more room for Indigenous voices in that particular space. So just be mindful of when it's might be somebody else's turn to be able to talk.
Yeah, thank you all, because I think that it is a source. And we heard this from the panelist presentations in January, where also there was very much this focus on relationship, right? And time and investment in that. And I think that was something that I really took away from that. And I love also, talking about participating, not just, and I think that's why I came up with this kind of this centering or recentering, and why we're calling it this, because I think often when we're going into conversations or into relationships, we're still centering what it is that we need as an organization. Here's what I'm looking for. We want to do better. And even though that comes from a good place, right, it's still not really understanding and taking the time or perhaps the research with who you're partnering with or who you're seeking to, and just becoming aware of, what or who are the various tribal citizens and communities and organizations where you are doing that research, and then participating in perhaps events or things that are happening. Recently I went to a workshop. It was in British Columbia. It was an amazing experience with the Similkameen, and I got to experience my first powwow. And then I came back here and I had other people going, how do I get involved in things that are happening in the Indigenous spaces here in Denver? I'm like, that's a great question. What is going on? So I just did some Googling, and I learned that we have a Denver powwow coming up. And I went to the website, and it says, there's very much, like, so much focus. This is a community. This is something that is very much, connection and ritual and, participation for the Indigenous community. But I love that there was space in there saying, hey, for non-Indigenous spectators, here's some information for you. And so I went there and I looked at it and went, great. Okay. Cause I felt like that same space of, is this a space that I'm going to be okay in? Am I intruding, right, and taking space in somebody else's, rituals and events or, whatever they're doing? And so that was a fear that I had. And I think that that's very real, that sometimes we're dancing in that I really am curious and I want to learn and I really want to support, but I'm not sure if this is my space or if I belong here. And so I thought that was really helpful. But I also know that, like, you have to kind of do the research. You have to kind of go looking around, and don't always go to them and say, oh, by the way, hey, how can I participate in your space? You kind of have to do a little bit of research, but it also helps that if you start to build relationships in the community that you're in and start to learn more, I think that really helps too. So we're all kind of navigating that, right, when we're really curious and interested. But I think it's also just very helpful from all of you to hear things like respecting time and respecting space, and know when to go in and know when to kind of hold back. I think those are very valuable. So now I'd like to kind of turn this back over to you all and ask more about the work that you're doing and why do you do it? I think that listeners, I think, are really curious and would love to know. Who would like to start us off?
I'll start us off. Otherwise, we're going to take a couple minutes playing chicken again. My husband and I were both Oneida tribal citizens. We're both just res kids, grew up here on the reservation, but we didn't really have access to a lot of our traditional knowledge, our teachings. It was still very much only certain people had that access. And today it's very different. You know, our daughters are now 18 and 19, and they grew up learning the language, singing the songs, going to ceremonies. So we're in an entirely different world, but there's still a lot of people in our community that don't have access to our traditional knowledge. And we found that seeds in our foods are a really safe way to come back to that. So we grew our first garden in 2015. So we're still relatively new. We had this tiny little garden. We grew our indigenous foods for the first time, and we were hooked. The next year, we got a bigger garden. We formed a co-op of families to grow acres of corn together. And then that following year, I convinced my husband to purchase vacant land, build a home, and create a farmstead. And the purpose of this place is to create a space, a safe space, where people wouldn't have to be shamed or embarrassed for not knowing our traditional ways related to our foods, and that they could come here and gather and learn. We would learn about planting seeds, harvesting, cooking, food preparation, making traditional tools and crafts that are related to the utilitarian ways of caring for our foods. And an Oneida faith keeper named our property Ukwakhwa Farm. It means our foods, where we plant things. So we built up this space. 2 years ago, we started a nonprofit that helped us gain access to grant funding. We've built a certified commercial kitchen, a trading post, a large event space. We're currently constructing wheelchair accessible paths through our garden ways. We're going to have raised garden beds. Just why we do this is to create another space for the community to learn, and we're really having fun doing it. And we don't know what we're doing. So much of what we're doing is winging it. But fortunately, the seeds and are very responsive to us, and they're very generous. And then we in turn share those seeds with our community.
Thank you for sharing that, Vickie. And I've gone ahead and put your website in the chat as well, if anybody wants to learn more or wants to contribute to your new nonprofit status, which is just really wonderful. Congratulations. Okay, who would like to go next?
I'll go next. Well, you know, our tribal grounds is located in Burlington, North Carolina. And why I do what I do, I'm the tribal administrator. I wear many hats. And none of them are easy at times, but we are in the process of revitalizing our language. So we have actually started a nonprofit called the Occaneechi Language Project. But I've been studying my language for quite a few years, but we decided to start a nonprofit. And we have online classes. We have over, I think, like 134 people that attend. And so that has been just working with the materials that we have to start our language. And but in addition to that, just bringing back the traditions and the culture back alive, because it was a little dormant for a while. But I started with indigenous herbs. I'm an indigenous herbalist, so started bringing back like the herbs, the healing herbs, and how everyday life you can really use herbs, and they're all around you. You know, their plants are all around you that you can use. And so just kind of just educating the community about that. And when you walk out and you see everything is not a weed. So, you know, just educate them how our people actually lived. And, you know, the forest was the pharmacy because all the medicines came from there. And, you know, you watch the animals to see what, you know, they were eating or what they didn't like or when they were sick. So it's just like those culture classes to educate them about that. And so it's worked really well. And even making syrup from a bark of a tree, like different things. So I think it's really helped in that their understanding, going back to like the traditional ways of just the way we used to do things and holding these classes and things like that. And it's been a really showing because trying to go using the elders with their knowledge and what they used to do back then and teaching like the youth and community of that. So sometimes it can be a little bit hard, getting people to be engaged and, you work really hard at it. And and just try to make them understand how this would help them, to practice our traditional ways, to get back the way our ancestors lived. And recently, we have started construction on a tribal center, just expanding what we have. And guess who is the project manager? Me. So, but this way we can really expand with our cultural classes and do much more than we could before, because we were really lacking in, well, not lacking, we needed more space. UNC came out one time. Danielle said, I'm going to bring, she's director, she said, I'm going to bring a couple of people with me. And I was like, oh, great, we have room, got out the chairs and everything. And I'm standing out there, and she had texted saying, we're on our way. And this big bus, like a Greyhound bus, pulls up, and the chair of the tribe, he goes, we really need some space, because we thought the bus was filled with people. We were like, where are we going to put these people at? But it was a lot, but it was standing room only. We crowded them into the space that we had. No more chairs, anything. So, and it's just really, and that's just why it's worth it. It's a lot of hard work. I've never been a construction manager before, but the benefits of it, the benefits from it. And I do the work. The reason I do this and I work really hard is that I'm just committed to my tribe, and I love my tribal community, and I am trying to make sure that we're sustainable. So, like I could be asleep at night and something pops in my head and I'm like, I'll be so glad when this construction is over, because, but I know that the end part of it will be all worth it, that we will have the space that we need. We will be able to do more with the community. And I just feel that everything that I'm doing is worth it. So it's that commitment to what, like I think about my ancestors, I'm committed to doing this, give me the strength. But I think in the long run, it's hard. But at the end of everything, I think it's what my community needs. So I just continue to do it, no matter how tired I am.
That was really beautiful, Vickie. Thank you for sharing that. How about Carmen?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So just to reiterate what Malin had kind of said earlier, I work as the operations coordinator for Assiniboine Park Conservancy, and we are an urban park located in Winnipeg. And Winnipeg actually has the largest population of Indigenous people in Canada as a city, which is wonderful because I grew up in Winnipeg itself. So my reserve is in northern Manitoba. It's called Puckatawagan, and I belong to the Mattias-Column First Nation, or Cree Nation. They go by both, but it's been wonderful to have grown up in an environment where I see people like me and my cultural practices have been represented in a lot of different aspects of my life. But here at the park, the work that I primarily do as a horticulture, I guess I'll backtrack a little bit. I've always had an interest in horticulture. I grew up foraging sweetgrass with my mom, cedar, all those kinds of things, growing gardens with my dad. So it's always been something that's felt very second nature to me. And I guess over time, my goals as a horticulturalist, as somebody who tends to the land, have definitely shifted. And I definitely think that it is to include more of my culture into the work that I do. And I think this, again, is like a really wonderful opportunity to be a part of. But at the park, I sit on our National Day of Truth and Recon Committee, and so I co-chair that. So in Canada, we have that day. It's the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, where we acknowledge, a number of different things. Another popular reference to what that date is Orange Shirt Day. So basically myself and one other Indigenous employee here at the park lead this committee, and we organize a day of learning, you could call it too. So the park gives everyone an orange shirt if they would like it, so that they can wear that. And typically we have uniforms here at the park. So it's really nice to see a sea of orange and a sea of support on that day. But during that day, we offer knowledge from a elder who we have asked to spend time with us, and we keep a sacred fire throughout the day, which is a really nice, it's a step forward. And I think that's kind of what we're working towards right now, is just including more representation into the work that we do. Another project that I'm excited to be working on this summer is designing our Indigenous display here at the Leaf. So our conservatory has 3 different biomes, and we have one that's called the display biome. So it changes out 5 times a year. This year, there's a focus on geographical and cultural inspiration for our displays. So currently, we're preparing for a Brazilian show, but then following that in the summer, we have our Indigenous show. So I'm working with another colleague. Her name is Mamie Griffiths. So we're 2 Indigenous women, and we get to design this space, which I think is really amazing. And I feel very fortunate that the park has kind of enabled me. And I guess that also goes back to how we can be allies, and it's providing your staff with opportunities like this, because I feel very valued and very much like I can showcase something about myself and something that I think the population of Winnipeg will see themselves in as well. So for that project, we're using medicinal plants. Vickie, I think you might find that interesting. So we're using medicinal plants or native plants grown in Manitoba to share about the traditional uses of how we would take from the land, but then also give back to the land. So it's a really exciting experience to be a part of. So that's just like a super, in a nutshell, version of some of the projects that I'm working here at the park. But yeah, I think the reason why we do it is because, first of all, we love it, and second, we have a responsibility to.
Well said. Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Marissa?
So I am the Associate Director of the American Indian Center here at UNC Chapel Hill. We are an academic and community engagement unit that we fall within the Office of the Provost. I always tell people this was my dream, kind of my dream job when I saw the position open up. So I am a doctoral student here at UNC Chapel Hill. That's how I got to be here. I'm in American Indian and Indigenous Studies, and I focus on Oneida intellectual history. Like Vickie, I'm a citizen of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. And I love school. I've always loved school. And I love learning and reading and exchanging ideas with people. But I also come from this background of service to Native communities. So for a couple of years before I started my doctorate, I worked for the Administration for Native Americans with my mom. And we provided technical assistance to tribal organizations on the eastern half of the United States who were implementing community development projects. And one of the things I loved about ANA, working with ANA, is they have this philosophy, much like we have at the center, that the most effective community projects are those that come out of the communities themselves. Solutions to community challenges have to come from communities themselves. And that was the kind of work that we supported as technical assistance providers working for the Administration for Native Americans. And as I was doing that work, I was inspired by all the different ways I saw tribes and tribal organizations using those funds from ANA to implement projects. You know, I saw Occaneechi people, Native Hawaiian people coming up with ways to indigenous ways of food preservation. So when they're reviving this canoe tradition, this long-standing canoe tradition among Occaneechi people, they also are trying to simultaneously revive indigenous food preservation systems. So bringing the food out onto the boats that will be good for these long-term voyages. I was visiting language projects, revitalization projects up in the Pacific Northwest. So I was just so inspired. And that's kind of what brought me back to my studies, is thinking about what are the unique things that we've been doing as Oneida people to exercise our sovereignty. And so then, you know, here I have this background in Native community development, also loving school. And then the American Indian Center, we are a bridge. And this is our mission statement. We are a bridge between the strengths of our Native communities and the strengths of Carolina's service, teaching, and research. So in a nutshell, I describe that to people as like, we bring the university's resources out to tribal communities. We make sure those resources are available to tribal communities, and we bring tribal communities into the university. So their priorities, their input, their ideas, we make sure that those also come in. And for me, that's just my dream, is I get to do both the things I love, you know, working in this intellectual space and exchanging ideas with people, but also doing it in a way that is responsive to and also serves tribal communities. And so it's a challenge, you know, it is, you know, the university is still the university. It has all these, you know, are kind of archaic principles and this and that. But I am, you know, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but I'm also an eternal optimist, I think. And I do think that, you know, I think we're really unique amongst institutions, Native serving institutions. The American Indian Center is, in the way that we are trying to really shepherd the university to be this place that it can be truly public. So UNC Chapel Hill people know that we are the first public university in the country. And there's this, people say that UNC is proudly public. And so we really keep them accountable and hold them accountable for that type of thinking. It's like, well, you have to be accountable to the native public too, and here's how. And so we bring those ideas in, and yeah.
Oh, that was so lovely. Thank you all for sharing that, right? I mean, because I know that a lot of this is deeply personal, right? It's not just what we do and that we're paid to do, right, in our job. Like there's such a connection to who you are, your identity, your journey, and your purpose. So thank you for sharing that. So speaking of challenges, thank you for that segue, Marissa. What are some of the frustrations, challenges, or concerns that you have or that you're experiencing? I'm going to pick someone. So since we started the game of chicken earlier, and I want to make sure we get to this, I'm just going to random. So I'm going to start with Vickie. You win.
The challenges. I was hoping other people could have theirs so that I could find out what's left because we have so many. A lot of times it's the frustration that we have is the knowledge that it's how we care for our seeds with traditional knowledge and what did our ancestors do? How did they care for them? And it's sure people might have like the basics, but there's other things like that we're dealing with climate change. So even if we are able to pick up all those scattered pieces of traditional knowledge, we still have to figure that out in a changing climate. Like when we put fish in our mounds for fertilizer, the suckers are running at different times than what they historically had. So that separates the timing of when you do things. There's different pests that are coming into our gardens that our ancestors didn't have to deal with. There's just this bizarre weather that they didn't have to deal with. So for us, one of the biggest frustrations is trying to navigate this space by not only relearning what was taken from us, but try to do so in a very different landscape than what we had to do. So I do have more frustrations and more challenges. So maybe if there's time, we can come back to the rest of my laundry list. But that is the top one is navigating that space and the lack of accessible knowledge. And I will just add to that, though, that when we do find information, our first instinct is to try to turn around and share that with people. So we have a YouTube channel, we have a TikTok, we have a Facebook. That's how when we pick up these bits of knowledge, that's what we do is we try to share them with other people. So for those people, it's not that hard for them to find it because we know how hard it is to find that information. So we want other people to not have to work so hard to be able to access their information that should have been readily available, if not for our history of colonization, assimilation, and removal.
That is a big one, Vickie. And I think that this is something, at least from the public garden, public horticulture space, we kind of sit in as well, right? Understanding, well, how things traditionally grew and where they grew. And then we have these spaces that are dedicated to beauty and to growing things. And so we're running into some of these challenges well and trying to navigate that. And I feel like there's such knowledge that we can learn from one another, right? Like just how are you navigating this space? And I think the public, it could greatly benefit from understanding versus, grabbing the next, pesticide or wanting to just like completely obliterate their garden and start over, like sterilize it. Like that's just not the way we want to do things, right? So I feel like there's a lot of, I certainly as a gardener could certainly relate to so much of that. And there's also just things that I want to grow and I need it to grow and it's not doing it on my schedule and my plans. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure we'll have time to come back around to more. Carmen, would you like to share? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like continuing from that point. I think a lot of garden design, certainly a lot of garden design has been influenced. It's very Eurocentric. So when Beckie's describing issues about certain pests or insects, like settlers have brought over so many different plants that carry their own pathogens, viruses, diseases, insects, pest problems. So I think there's also a challenge to shifting the perspective from having these like pristine English style gardens to more of a naturalized space that our climates can support better, like in every way. So I think that's a challenge too. People really like the general public really likes having something that's a fine edge or, very symmetrical. And I think there is a place for that too. I would just like to see Indigenous style gardening interwoven with that. Like, I think that we can evolve and continue to develop what horticulture is, and it doesn't have to be something that's from 1,000 years ago.
I love that. And adapting concepts and ideas of what is beautiful, right? And seeing that narrative change. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carmen. How about Vickie?
All right. So mine is more on as being tribal administrator. I am responsible for running the tribe on a daily basis. So that's a lot. But I find that it's the frustrations that I find doing my job is like resources, because we are a state recognized tribe. We're not federally recognized. So we are not open to a lot of grants like the federal tribes. So, and mostly the grants that we get are probably discretionary. We don't get a lot of non-discretionary grants. And so it's like really frustrating a lot when you're trying to keep the lights on, keep everything going, have community events and things like that. And I think it was in 2022, at the end of 2022, that we finally, all the tribes in North Carolina, which there are 8 recognized tribes in North Carolina, the Eastern Band of Cherokees are federally recognized, but the other 7 tribes, we were allotted we were given funds from the state and a substantial amount. And that's the first time that we've ever had that. So if you think, like we are kind of dependent on our donations and different things like that, or being state recognized, it was very frustrating to really implement a lot of things when, you don't have the resources or we're not eligible for them. So I've written a lot of grants, and I had to say the American Indian Center has been the top ones that have ever always helped in that. You have the people there that can help with the grants and grant writing and things like that. I've learned a lot as being tribal administrator. And I think it's just really frustrating when you do go after things and it's not geared to what you're doing at the present, but what they're stating that you have to do. And so that's a big thing with us. And, it's just trying to keep everything going, and finding different resources, even for the language revitalization and just working on that. And like, even though, you get funds, you still have to put a budget in, you still have to say what you're going to do. They still have to look at it and say, okay, you can do it. This is within that. So, so that's those restrictions that you have, and you're just operating on that. And, for, getting federal recognition takes many years, a lot of money. And so it is, it's just frustrating when you're trying to keep, everything going and watching the budget and, and always trying to seek out new ways and, get, partnerships with different organizations and things like that. So I just feel like sometimes it's like, I don't know, I think I'm good. I'm managing good, but, I just wish there was more resources and things available to state recognized tribes.
Thank you, Vickie. I think that is an area that I'm observing just in the space around, when we think about barriers and challenges, the process of grant funding, right? And giving of money in itself is a barrier. The hoops you have to jump through. And so I feel like, when our organizations, or if we are part of organizations that have the ability to give funds, we need to really think about like how we approach doing that to actually eliminate the barriers to the access of those funds, because it does come from a very kind of academic system or structural hierarchy. So I'm grateful for you bringing that up, because I don't think that sometimes we always think about it. Yet we're also as mostly nonprofit organizations having to apply for grants, but often we have either experience, background, or people who can do that. And not to say that there aren't organizations. I myself am going through the rounds of learning how to do that. It is so much work, so much work. So thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, I can segue right into that. So I would say one of our challenges with our garden has been funding and securing funding for it. So the American Indian Cultural Garden is located directly across the street from our office, and it is land that is leased by the university. And we really struggled to be able to write grants that demonstrated that the space that we were intending to build on was a space that we had control, like an extended amount of control over, extended length of time that we would have control over it. So because it's land that's university's land, we had, to jump through all these hoops to show that, well, this is university's land that we have the permission and the use agreement to be able to use for this amount of time. But the university itself actually only leases this land for a certain amount of time. I always think that my thought on this is like the university leases land for short windows of time because there's always the potential that it might put a parking lot there. So like it doesn't want to commit to anything because it's like, oh, and we might need this for later for a parking lot. But our ability to demonstrate that this was land that we had the ability to be able to use with the university's permission and sanction, and that we could build something out of it that would be sustainable and would last, was like a hoop that this was a challenge for us, like one of these bureaucratic challenges that made it difficult for grant writing. So we submitted a grant to a funder who was very interested in helping us construct the garden and said, but we don't think that based on the way this lease agreement is written and your relation, this contract with the university and how it uses the land, we're not sure we actually want to support construction, but we will give you programming money. But then we negotiated that to actually be advantageous to our tribal communities. So we effectively are using that money as pass-through money that we will then package into grant awards that we will give to tribal communities for their own kind of garden projects, place-based humanities projects in their tribal communities or in their communities. So, but we eventually did get funding to be able to complete construction of the garden. And that, I think that's the collaborative effort between us and NCBG. We could not have gotten those grants submitted and written without their help and without their insights and expertise in these types of construction projects. But we were, I think, this was it was the bureaucracy being able to prove that this, demonstrate to funders who want that very concrete information, which I understand, but also was a challenge for us to be able to prove. We were able to do it, but it did take some time. And I think cultivating partnerships, finding people to help you where they can, of course, we had to consult facilities, the university facilities people, because it's university land, but they are people who know what they were able to give us all these insights that, have made the process much easier, and getting the permitting and getting approvals from the town of Chapel Hill. They know all of that and they are ready to help us. So even though you have those hoops you have to jump through, we found very good friends who are helping us jump through them. So at least there's that's the silver lining.
Well, I love that because, I think that's it, right? Is when that's another form of allyship, really just helping to work through and navigate something that you are familiar with so that other people don't have to suffer or go through the same challenges or maybe find a way around. And I think that's something that we haven't really underscored, and that is really helpful because I feel like sometimes we are in a society and a culture that just tries to throw up as many barriers as possible. Well, we can't do this way. We can't do it this way. And because we're all in a very fear-driven society of litigation, of whatever all the things are. So sometimes taking a step back and just going, how can we actually benefit who we're working with? How can we actually make this easier and simpler? Which brings kind of I think a couple of points that we had a conversation about, when prepping for this webinar. The whole bureaucracy is this very kind of systematic structure that was created through colonialization. And Vickie, you brought up decolonizing, and that might be a term that is new or unfamiliar for some folks who are listening, or perhaps have perceptions on what that means. So I guess I want to ask the question, in your relationships and how you do things, what does that look like when you talk about decolonizing spaces? Who's involved that? What can we do? Because I think burning down the system is not the answer, right? We're all figuring out ways to work within it and how we can slowly shift and change the model into something better, I think, over time. I don't know. I for one, don't want everything to just collapse in an apocalyptic kind of thing. I feel like some people are there. I'm not one of those people, but I think most of us understand that we don't want to cause more pain and suffering to basically those who are the most vulnerable in our communities and our society. So what does that kind of decolonizing look like to you, or perhaps the small ways we can adjust to decolonize your spaces or your processes? Who would like to jump into that big vat of, that's a giant topic, I know in itself, it could be its webinar. Carmen?
Yeah, sure. I can start. I think in an effort to decolonize spaces, it takes really strong leadership, willing parties, and it's the holistic approach that has to be taken and delicately taken as well. I think, I keep referencing that this is so amazing, but I think this is a really good step towards what the decolonized space looks like, having our voices, this group of women here kind of discussing what our values are, what's important to us, and like how we see a vision for the future. I know that doesn't like answer how to decolonize spaces at all. It barely scratches the surface, but I think that's somewhere to start.
Well said. Anyone want to add to that? And if a soapbox needs to come out, I'm here. I'm all about a soapbox.
I think that first people they have to acknowledge the damage of colonization and that genocide is still going on because you hear people say, oh, that happened so long ago, get over it and all this stuff. And no, it's still going on because there's so many ways that they were trying to still erase, indigenous people. And, it's ongoing and it's active. And, just listening to like some conversations, not if you're really involved in them, but you could be just standing on the other side and someone's talking about it, even if they're looking at like, say, art by indigenous people. You can also like on the sidebar, you can hear little, conversations that come out of that. And they think that this is all gone but it isn't, we're still in this, and genocide in more ways than one is still going on. And I think people have to realize that it is still here, it is still here, just like the land, people, I own this land. I own, no, we don't really own the land because if we move, are we going to put it in our pocket or a suitcase and take it with us? And I did say that to somebody one time, just, I don't know. And I wanted to but it just came out, but it was nice. But, just different things that people say. And, I worked in the medical field at UNC and, my office was, of course, my culture was all around me. And, the things that people said, you would not believe, when they were checking out. And, I was always amazed at this. And, in my mind, I'm thinking like, they're into colonization right now. And, I don't think they need to decolonize right now. But, just the things that they would say and, and it's just that education too, because they figure that everything's okay, that, all that's in the past and, we're over that. But, we always have an ongoing fight all the time. And, it's going to be ongoing. And as Indigenous people, I feel we're the only ones that have to keep fighting for everything. It's like nothing is ever easy or simple for us. We have to prove this. We have to prove this. We have to do this. And I think it's just, and it's ongoing. It's, it's still here. It hasn't went anywhere, but we are still here. And, you can't break our spirits. So they will be here. We're not going anywhere.
I love that because I think there are a lot of perceptions that Indigenous peoples are not visible a lot, right? Like we forget that you are still here, but also I think as a society, we forget that the displacement is still occurring. The distance, access to resources, those are all part of it. And I don't know that we are always realizing that this is also part of this kind of system, the systemic injustices that we're still experiencing as a society and the culture in the land that we're on. So I thank you for bringing that up because I don't know that everyone sees that. And I think that when we hear things like get over it, or one of my favorites, people have been conquering people forever. This is what humans do. And, we just need to kind of realize that happened and now let's move forward. Except that I think that there's underlying belief that it's not still happening. And I think that's a big truth. And it is painful. It is uncomfortable. But it also is just a lack of imagination, as if like this is our only choice in lot in life is to conquer and hurt people. We have no sense of ability to understand that maybe we can do things a little differently. Maybe we can be conscious and aware and change things. Our little soapbox came out for a moment. I'm going to hand it back all to you guys. Vickie, did you have anything that you wanted to add from decolonizing?
Yeah, so I think there's, like you said, many different directions you can take a conversation about what decolonizing is. Some people have a hostility about the word decolonizing because it doesn't really quite capture it. But anyway, the way I like to perceive, or one aspect of this, is the healing process. Like Vickie was talking about, it's ongoing. We all need to understand what it's doing to us, and then that reconnecting. So here at our farmstead, one of the ways that we do that is we understand and we acknowledge our past and what happened, even if it's a very recent past, or even if it's a still happening past, as in it's going to happen in the future again. But I think we need to understand and educate ourselves about our own histories so that we can understand why we're in the situation we're in today. Because so many people are wandering around not understanding, like, why don't I know my language? Why don't I know our ceremonies? It's like, it's not your fault. It's you are the product of all of these federal policies that were aimed at erasing us, and we're still here. So it's okay if you don't know. It's okay if this isn't something you were raised with, that we collectively have a responsibility to pick those pieces back up and share them amongst each other. So I think for me, the decolonization is finding that and then sharing it and helping each other heal and reconnect.
That was so beautifully said. And that's something that I heard recently from somebody I work with in the Indigenous space as a consultant. But it was very interesting when I asked the question, how do we move forward as a country? And how do we deal with the pain of shame, guilt, hurt? And his response was healing. We have to heal. And I just thought that was really beautiful, right? Heal relationships, heal within ourselves. Because that saying, right? Hurt people. Oh, is that not happening right now? There's just so much of that. And so I think that the counter to that is the healing. Does anybody have anything else they want to share when it comes to decolonizing spaces and what that looks like? Who's involved?
I suppose echoing Vickie, that like decolonization is it's a multifaceted, very like dynamic project. And there are plenty of disagreements even within Native communities about what decolonization means. So, I think about, if anybody is in Indigenous studies knows Eve Tuck's very famous line, decolonization is not a metaphor, it is the actual literal returning of land. And so that is like a very rigid perspective. But there are other people who think, well, no, decolonization is much more than that. But then that there are all types of things that come out from returning the land that are, that just saying returning the land will not maybe make explicit. So I throw that out there. And then I also think too about how sometimes something that can get confused with decolonization, but I think maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, you get other perspectives on this, but decolonization doesn't always mean indigenization, I think. So you can decolonize a field. So something like anthropology. We could decolonize anthropology by being critical of how that field of study emerged in its history, right? But does that, in being critical, indigenize anthropology? That's a different project. And I think that that's kind of my maybe focus, and what I do is actually indigenizing things in our approach, even with what we do at the center. And maybe by indigenizing things, we are thereby decolonizing things. But I think, we are indigenizing the campus by having this American Indian Cultural Garden that speaks to the historic and ongoing presence of Native people in this area, in this state, in this region. And, we make sure that this is where things are indigenized by our constantly ensuring that Native community perspectives drive what we do. And so like we are indigenizing the mission of the direction of the university by making sure that we bring those perspectives into as best as we can. So I think about something like, a project we're hopefully working on is the universities in the midst of establishing universal data management protocols. And we want to make sure that Native priorities and perspectives are part of that conversation, and that we are, part of I think I think maybe it does the dual work of decolonizing and indigenizing, but I'll just throw that out there as like something for people to consider is like, there's decolonizing and there's indigenizing. And I think indigenizing is that part, coming back to the beginning of the conversation, of bringing in Native voices and consulting Native community members and getting those perspectives and allowing those to come forth and giving them precedent and priority. So.
Ooh, that was well said in a really perfect way, I think, to kind of end that question, right? It's about who has decision-making abilities and who has power and influence. Well said. Thank you all for sharing your views on that, because I know that was a big and a heavy topic as well. So I'm going to shift it to something maybe perhaps more positive. What are you looking forward to? What's next? What excites you? I'm going to jump to Vickie and change order this time. Surprise.
I knew it. I'm the oldest one on here, and I get picked on, So
I was picking on
get it.
my fellow North Carolinian, or just also because you have so much wisdom that you're sharing, and I thought I would just change it up. Thank you.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, sure. Try and butter me up, but no,
I'm good
it's
at it.
okay. Well, what am I looking forward to? I am looking forward to a lot of things, but one thing I'm looking forward to is being recognized as a person and not having these labels that sometimes we get, people put on us, or not recognizing that I am an Indigenous person and that not trying to erase me because, I am, very visible out there, and I'm trying to put, any cause for Indigenous people, whether it's my tribe or any other tribe, I'm always in support of that. And I think that, like sometimes people go, "Oh, I've never heard of your tribe. Oh, are there's Indians? Oh, I've never met an Indian before." And it happens a lot at the powwow, and I hate when people say to their children, "Hey, let's take a picture. Can I take a picture with you?" They're real Indians, like stand, so things like that to, realize that, we are people, and we are Indigenous, and stop the erasure of us. And, I want to also like for the tribe to have like free from so much government control in telling us like what we need to do as a tribal nation, or defining, you have to, defining who is an Indian and who is not, because there's a lot of tribes that not, according to the federal government, they're not tribes, and they are tribes, So, to still go through that and just hopefully, like, things like that, that I feel that, we have to fight for every day, that when, you're reading the news or something's going on, and, anything to do with Indigenous people, it just seems like they're just still, we know we're still sort of on the back burner, but I want, one day to be free from that, because, being under the government control or stating that, we have to prove who we are. Just when we went for state recognition, we had to prove, who we are. And as long as we've been in North Carolina and all our roots and stuff like that, and just be, just be who we are, and not have someone define who we are or tell us who we are. And the last thing, I'm looking forward to the end of the construction era here for me. But I just want my tribe to survive and to have some sustainability and to keep on the path that we're on. We're growing, we're doing things, sharing our culture, our history. Like Becky said, learning who we are, and teaching community members this so that they'll know. So that is the path that, what I'm looking forward to with the new classes and different things, and sharing that so we can be a stronger nation.
Well said. Thank you for sharing that. And we also, I think, hope that the construction goes smoothly for the rest of it, and that is over quickly. Get something I feel like it's there. It's attainable. But I think the others are as well. More of these kind of conversations are happening. So thank you very much. Becky.
Sure, I'm looking forward to similar things. We're currently under construction. They're doing our paths right now. I can see the machinery outside. I'm excited to have our grandmas be able to have their walkers, or not have to worry about that. Our folks in wheelchairs, or parents with strollers can get access to our garden area. I'm really excited for that. And I'm excited for the growing season. And this will be our third year that we are operating under with what we've developed, which is called a fee schedule, because people kept asking us like, oh, can you come do this? Or can we come and do this at your place? And we just didn't really know like how to charge people or how that works. And because our time is valuable and we still need to support all of the things that we're doing here. So we developed a fee schedule, and it's a sliding scale for if you're a for-profit corporation, you're going to pay this. If you're a school or a government, you're going to pay this. And if you're a small BIPOC organization, you're going to pay this, which is sometimes nothing. So we have this situated for all kinds of different activities here. We make corn husk dolls. We cook outside in the coals. We show people how to process our corn. We make corn mush, and we do tours, and we have meals here on the farmstead. So we have all kinds of events that are getting booked already for the next coming season. And I'm just really looking forward to it because it feels like we're finally getting to be in a comfortable position where people ask us to do something and we just send off our fee schedule. Like, yes, this is how much things cost. And, people are like, okay, let's do it. Whereas earlier on, they're like, oh, we're not going to pay you to give us our traditional knowledge. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm not extracting anything from anybody because we need to turn around and use that to be able to continue to do this work here. And it's not like we're not rolling in it here, okay? So we're still trying to find ways to keep the lights on and pay our bills. And we have responsibilities to do that too. And when possible, we have events that are free and open to the public. So I'm looking forward to this season.
Yay, spring, growing season, but also, ooh, sounds like you're just about to run an empire over there. I hate to use that term, but I'm just saying, like when you're doing all the things and wearing all the hats, it's so much work. I know Vickie can really do that as well. Carmen, what is exciting you? What do you look forward to? What's next?
Big picture wise, I really look forward to the continued relationship building between Indigenous people and business partners or organizations, because I think that helps remove, like essentially that's what we want. We want to get rid of like the prejudice or any of the biases or misconceptions about our culture. So I think you can do that when you really truly know someone. So I'm excited for that to happen. When it comes to the work that I do day to day, I cannot wait to see the summer display come to completion and have it out and people seeing it, interacting with it. So I would say that's what I'm really looking forward to. I have to do a lot of writing for some briefs in the next couple of days. So that's what I'm looking forward to finishing.
Wonderful. Yes. Spring is a very exciting time in parks and gardens and
Yes.
watching all that planning over the winter.
Exactly.
Right?
It's all happening. We just put in, it's all happening so quickly. We just put in our final orders for our annuals to come in for the summer. Our climate is quite tricky here. So we do have quite a few annuals that we have to plant and then remove in the fall. But yeah, it's gearing up.
It's gearing up. Excellent.
Thanks.
And Marissa, last but not least.
Yeah, we are similarly under construction, our garden is. And so we're dealing with, the challenges Vickie is experiencing on a smaller scale. But so I'm looking forward to that wrapping up and the exciting part of getting things in the ground. And that's also going to be, community consultation. We will have meetings about what do returning to the plant list, what do people want to see? Where do they want to see it? I'm excited I think there's just going to be so many unforeseen projects, beautiful, beneficial projects that come out of this garden that we don't even know about now. We have visions of what the garden could be, community members do. But I think that once it's there, I think there are so many opportunities that are going to come out of it that we don't even anticipate. So this is going to, we are thinking of this now as a learning space for the campus community to learn about the Native presence here on campus and across the state. But it's also a gathering space for our community members. And I think there's going to be so many things that we're able to host in the garden and do in the garden with our community members that we just haven't even imagined yet. But then I'm also just really looking forward to the day. Like I keep thinking about as we're going through all these challenges, 10 years from now, this garden is just going to feel like, and Malin, you and I were talking about this when you visited, the garden is just going to feel like it was always there. 10 years from now for Native students on campus, they're going to come to this campus and they're going to feel like, oh, I'm going to UNC Chapel Hill, where's there's the American Indian Center and the American Indian Cultural Garden, and there's the gift walkway on campus that was designed by one of our Occaneechi Saponi artists here in North Carolina. And there are all these things on campus, and they're just going to feel like it's always been there. And I am so excited for that day when students come onto campus and they just know it's there for them, and we will have been part of that project. So
what a beautiful vision as well. That is, I could say that I think that that is the goal with so many, right, of these kind of partnerships and the spaces that were created, that they were always there. So that's beautiful. Thank you all for your contribution and to the work that you're all doing. I definitely want to open up the space. We have some time for questions from the audience, so feel free to put that in the chat or into the Q&A. And while you're doing that, or maybe thinking about questions, I'm going to ask this. This is a safe space. If there is a question that you're afraid to ask, this is the space to do that. And I hope that you will be courageous to ask them for any of our participants. Please do so. This is the access that you have here to some really wonderful people, but also people who are doing a lot of great work out there. And while that's happening, I just also want to just thank you all for just kind of sharing your views, but also just kind of some of the information I've been synthesizing as far as just, you know, why you're doing what you're doing, you know, that whole like preservation and access to your culture, your rituals, your food, that knowledge and passing that on. Like that's a theme that I hear. And I think that that's a really wonderful thing. The language revitalization, I follow several different, you know, Indigenous influencers, et cetera, but also I'm starting to see a lot more accounts where people are sharing and, you know, language and helping the public to kind of learn about that. So I feel like that's an amazing thing to do, is just to listen and to learn. Creating space, like literal physical space, whether that is for growing food or plants or medicine, but also just taking space in and being in the part of a space, right? Being involved. And I think that there's also this very much underlying love of your community, love of your tribes, love of your history, your past, your family, but also thinking about that love carrying through into the future. Commitment and a responsibility. Thank you. You all are carrying that, but I also feel like sometimes that's a heavy thing to carry. And I'm just going to add, as a woman, we tend to be the holders of so much responsibility, right? So just want to acknowledge and just create space for that acknowledgement. And this whole love of learning and continual learning, like that is just such a heart of, you know, who you all are. I feel like that's kind of just there. And I think that love of learning is something we all can like relate to, but we can learn from, and how we can all be kind of that connection, right? To the knowledge, to the practices, to centering Indigenous perspectives, voices, experience. And I think that is also the space where we also have accountability. That responsibility is not on the shoulders and should not be all solely on the shoulders of Indigenous and First Nations people. That we on the other side, on the outside, are very much responsible for creating this space, for having a sense of responsibility. That's why I'm passionate about the work that I do. I feel a sense of this responsibility, right? If I have a platform, if I have a voice, if I have access, then it's up to me and I need to do this. So I think that that's just something I just wanted to share all of that. These are just kind of the little notes and the observations that I was making, but it also makes a really beautiful mosaic of who we are, that we are all humans and we all create connection, but also we all can resonate with learning and the love of our families and our traditions on our spaces. So thank you all for sharing that. There's a question here from Carl Evanson, from Hawaii. I love this. Having Indigenous garden spaces are great and helpful, and I'm wondering about your thoughts on including Indigenous culture and sensibilities into all aspects of our public garden. That's a great one. Who would like to?
There's one thing that I think I've seen somewhere, and we try to do this at the park for certain shows that we do too, but in like a classic public garden or a botanical garden, they'll always have plant labels. And so often when those labels are made, it would be really incredible to see the language of that region showcased on that. So having, you know, you often see the common name, the Latin name, but then it would be great to have it in the language as well. So I think that's like something, a small way that you could see Indigenous cultures integrated into public garden spaces.
Well said. That representation, right? Just in our labels, the stories that we tell. And I think that this is something that I find really interesting and I think about a lot, which is public gardens, whether you're botanic, historic, pleasure, educational focus, we have a very public front and face. We are a connector, we're a community space, or we should be. And on the back end, we do a lot of science and research, right? There's a lot of that seems more back of house. Yet that's where it crosses over, right? That the research, the science, and the things that we're learning, we make public and we're sharing. So that is part of our responsibility, I think, and part of our role is to diversify and be more inclusive of those stories so that we're not only just sharing one perspective. I went to a garden in Mexico, El Charco del Ingenio, and it was really amazing because the plant labels and the stories were first of the indigenous local people. That was first and foremost. And that was a real shock for somebody. My background's in horticulture. I'm used to scientific and, right, taxonomic nomenclature, botanical names, and then common names. I thought that was really a brilliant move because it was really saying there's an identity and there's a story here. And it was just a little cue to that. And I think it prompted more curiosity. It certainly did with me. That was a really great question, Carl. Does anybody else want to share their thoughts or views on this? And maybe where are some of the cautionary tales, perhaps even, right, in sharing Indigenous culture and sensibilities?
Well, I'll just mention I did gardens. They had a kiosk. It was by plants and stuff, and that people could actually explain about the and and some properties, and even they had one because I do pine needle baskets, and they had that. So, but the plants, we talk about the plants, and it was just a kiosk as you're going through that and actually listen to your voice, and we're telling about the plant and different things, from an they were used. So that was like something that really added where, they could just, hear that and hear your voice.
Thank you, Vickie. There's a little bit of disruption. It sounds like might be a connectivity, but I feel like it did come through really just having the kiosk and being able to share stories and hearing the voices of Indigenous peoples. Is that what?
Yes, yeah, sorry that it was, yes, so that, when you walk through the garden and there was a kiosk right there and you could hear me explaining about the plant and different things. So I thought that was really good.
So literally hearing from the voices of Indigenous peoples, right? And it's not just somebody saying, I read this and, here it is, and I'm reiterating or regurgitating. Well said. Would anybody else like to add? And I can move on to the next question. Actually, I'm going to move on to the next question. We have 2 minutes left. So this is a really great question. And I think that this is one that we get here often. And this person is in a botanic garden and they are in a role of partnership and community engagement. And so they're kind of in charge of building relationships from scratch. And they really want to make it collaborative and positive and feel positive. They're struggling to figure out how to approach Indigenous communities. So should they share what we can offer and wait for communities to approach us with ideas, or should I present more thought out ideas and ask if there's interest in participation? They're afraid that, they don't want anybody to feel like they're asking too much too quickly. Who would like to jump in?
I suppose I can just start and just have a brief comment about like caution about here are our ideas and do you want to work with us? I think the approach would be kind of, to this is with the perspective of, I would think approach with the perspective of this is what we do and what is your perspective on what we do and what is your feedback on these ideas that we do have and what are your ideas and what would you like to see from us? And so I think going with that approach of like a curious and open-minded mindset rather than maybe having an agenda of or even like that you're already having the end goal of like getting them on board to ideas you already have. It's to approach local tribal communities with this sense of like, what do you want to see from us? So coming with questions rather than coming with the outcome of we want to be our partner on what we're already doing, you know?
Well said. Again, it's literal centering, right? And shifting the decision and the power to those that you are trying to connect with and understanding what their needs are, because they may not align with what your notions or what you're thinking that the needs are. Does anybody want to add to that? I feel like that was very well said, Marissa. Okay, well, with that, thank you all. I know we're at time. I appreciate you being here. I'm just so grateful for your presence, your voice, your perspectives, your honesty. But I also wish you all so much success and continued abundance in the work that you're doing, this important work that you're doing. And that I hope that those who have participated are really thinking differently. There was a lot of content here and a lot of information, but I think that this is all an exploration. So I would just say, put on your exploration type of kind of curiosity and wanting to learn. And get out there and be curious, learn more. But again, thank you to participants for being here. I appreciate you showing up and asking your questions. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Malin.
Onakiwa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alewa.